I was ready to ruin my brother, Ben, for what he did at the funeral. I stood on the porch with the eviction notice. The house was legally mine, but when he opened the door, he didn't fight the deed. He collapsed, pointing past me, whispering one word, "Carol." I dropped the papers. The person I thought I was evicting was the victim, and the real thief had already taken everything. I walked through the double doors of St. Jude's Chapel, a hollow ache in my chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with loss. I was running on fumes, having driven through the night to make it to Evelyn's funeral. But the sheer fatigue vanished the moment I saw the front row. It was a cold, clean shock. My mind went completely blank. I'd specifically asked my brother, Ben, to reserve the aisle seat. It was Mom's favorite spot, a small tradition. Yet, there it was, taken. Not just taken, but claimed. Cousin Fiona, a woman who hadn't spoken to Evelyn in 3 years and who always made the service about herself, was settled in my place. Her massive, garish floral arrangement, the kind Mom always hated, was on the floor, right next to the pew. But the final insult wasn't Fiona. It was the sight of a small, bronze locket, the one I'd intended to place on the coffin, shoved carelessly under the seat cushions, as if someone had hastily swept it aside. I didn't just feel forgotten, I felt erased. It wasn't the grief that broke me, I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. It was calculated cruelty. This wasn't an oversight, this was Ben, publicly asserting his sole claim to the family, making me a spectator at my own mother's farewell. He was saying, "You are an outsider now." The righteous anger that hit me was hotter and cleaner than any sorrow I'd felt all day. I stood there, a ghost in the back of the chapel, watching Ben look satisfied and Fiona preen. They thought they had won the final round of the family power struggle. But their arrogance made them blind. They were so focused on rearranging the seating chart that they forgot about the deed. My eyes narrowed. I realized right then that I was not going to be the victim. Not tonight. Not ever. I revealed a central secret, my voice hardening with legal authority. Ben had been living rent-free at Willow Creek, believing he owned it, but he failed to check the one document that matters. 5 years ago, I legally took full ownership of the house to protect it from one of Ben's disastrous lawsuits. The deed was registered in my name, a cold, 2-page legal fact. They spent 2 days rearranging the seating chart for a funeral, but they forgot to check one simple, 2-page document, I state, the title flashing across the screen with a jarring sound effect. The house belonged to me. And tonight, the tenant was getting served. I turn on my heel and walk out of the chapel. I ignore the sympathetic murmurs and the bewildered stares. I get straight into my car and call my lawyer. The paperwork was already drafted, prepared months ago as a contingency. Now, it was being activated. I described the frenetic, surreal action, the lawyer digitally submitting the final legal notice, my signature scribbled onto a pad, finalizing my intent, the engine roaring to life. The action is immediate and irrevocable. The paperwork was filed. The legal notice was delivered. The only thing left was the personal delivery, I explained. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I chose the law. The ultimate emotional statement is delivered with fierce finality as the scene transitions to me pulling up outside the dark, silent silhouette of the family home, Willow Creek. The tires crunch on the gravel, and I cut the engine. The resulting silence is deafening. When they took my seat at the funeral, they didn't realize they were forfeiting their roof. I walked out of that chapel, and I drove straight to the property to evict my own brother. I reach over and grab the heavy manila envelope containing the deed and the eviction notice. My hand trembles, but not from fear, from the sheer force of the control I'm finally exerting. I step out of the car and walk toward the familiar front door, the porch light a sickly yellow beacon. I had the keys, I had the law, and I had a right to justice, I state, the camera focused tightly on my resolute face. This was supposed to be my moment of vindication. The moment Ben finally understood the consequences. I pause, my hand just inches from knocking on the door. I look past the window, seeing shadows move inside. But the fear wasn't about the legal battle, or even the family breakdown. It was about something I couldn't see. I had assumed Ben was the real villain, but what I was about to find inside that house wasn't what I was looking for at all. It was a secret that made me question my entire memory of my parents, and a betrayal that was far deeper than any of us realized. I stand on Willow Creek's porch, my knuckles still stinging from the knock, and my mind is forced to revisit the years leading up to this point. The anger that fueled me from the chapel wasn't instantaneous, it was the result of a slow, corrosive erosion of trust. Ben and I were inseparable once. In the early days at this house, he was the loud, hilarious ringleader, and I was the quiet planner. But somewhere, around the time his early adulthood turned into a series of get-rich-quick and fail-fast schemes, that balance tilted permanently. Ben developed a compelling, almost magnetic charisma that he weaponized. He used it to charm investors, and when that failed, he used it to charm me into covering the shortfall. He became the perpetual taker. I became the financial backstop, the silent, responsible giver. His life was a dizzying, reckless ride, mine was the stable ground he constantly threatened to crack. I spent my 20s quietly pouring my own savings into his disastrous debts, failed coffee shops, cryptocurrency scams, a truly terrible idea for a gourmet dog food truck. I made sure Evelyn never worried, often sacrificing my own peace of mind and my own career advancement to keep him afloat. He'd promised to pay me back, look me dead in the eye, and then move immediately on to the next disaster, forgetting the last one entirely. I wasn't doing it for thanks, I was doing it to keep the family intact. But what I got in return was not gratitude, but a sense of profound, entitled expectation that culminated in the most public humiliation of my life at a funeral. The ultimate example of my giving, and Ben's complete failure to reciprocate, is the very reason I stand here with a deed in my hand. The house being in my name isn't some childhood fantasy or a sneaky inheritance grab. It was a terrifying legal strategy. 5 years ago, Ben's largest venture yet went spectacularly south. He was facing a massive, 7-figure lawsuit that would have left him destitute. Worse, the creditors were aggressively moving to seize Willow Creek, the only significant asset Evelyn owned. Evelyn, desperate to save the home, begged me to intervene. The agreement, meticulously drawn up by a lawyer and signed by all three of us, was explicit: I would accept the deed temporarily. The official, recorded transfer made me the sole, legitimate owner, ensuring the property was legally shielded from Ben's lawsuit. We all agreed that once the legal threats had faded, which took about 2 years, I would transfer the deed back to Evelyn, or perhaps jointly with Ben. That was the clear understanding. But years passed. The threat vanished. And Ben, enjoying life rent-free in a house protected by my name and my credit liability, simply refused to deal with the paperwork. Every time I asked him, he would scoff, "Relax. It's just a technicality. You worry too much. We'll get to it eventually." He treated my legal exposure, the liability of owning a property I didn't live in, as a minor inconvenience. By consistently ignoring my concerns and failing to correct the deed, Ben hadn't just been lazy, he had violated the foundational trust of the most important agreement we had. He left me holding the entire bag, and he wasn't about to get away with it. The funeral was the unforgivable line he crossed. The humiliation of seeing cousin Fiona in my seat, placing her hideous floral tribute where my memory should have been, confirmed everything. Ben didn't just forget me, he orchestrated my exclusion to make a public statement. I was nothing. That finalized my decision. That pain transformed my legal right into a moral imperative. Now, I look down at the eviction notice on the passenger seat, illuminated by the flashing security light of a neighbor's house. I allow myself one last moment of self-doubt, acknowledging the destruction I'm about to unleash. I am about to shatter my brother's life. But then, I grip the steering wheel, recalling the years of one-sided sacrifice. I remember the weight of the deed, the lawsuit, the constant worry. I remember the discarded locket under the pew. The decision is no longer about the house, it's about reclaiming my dignity. I remind myself of my final justification. I was about to destroy my family, but they had already done it for me. The tension is palpable. I am at the door, the time for turning back is over, and the confrontation is about to begin. Every quiet second of my drive has led to this point, where years of entitlement meet cold, hard law. My knuckles sting from the impact of the knock. The waiting is agony. When Ben finally opens the door, he's wearing a rumpled version of his funeral suit, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He assumes I'm there to console him, to fall back into the easy rhythm of reconciliation that always followed our family crises. A tired, relieved smile cracks his face. "Hey," he murmurs, his voice thick. "Look, I know you're mad about the seat, but we just buried Mom. Let's just talk inside." He steps back, expecting me to follow the script. I don't move. I lift the heavy manila envelope, its contents feeling like cold stone in my hand, and thrust it at him. "I'm not here to talk, Ben. I'm here to deliver this." His smile freezes. It's a horrible, slow-motion thing to watch. He takes the envelope, pulling out the folded papers. He reads the header first, "Notice to vacate." He lets out a single, harsh, disbelieving laugh. "What is this, a sick joke? You're going to use a bad day to try and extort me?" I cut him off, my voice steady, stripped of all warmth. "The joke was you thinking you owned this place. I'm not extorting you. I'm legally informing you that you have 30 days to vacate Willow Creek." I pull the official, sealed deed from the envelope and flash it in the porch light. "I am the sole legal owner, Ben. I became your landlord tonight." Ben crumples the eviction notice in his fist, his face cycling through disbelief, shock, and finally, pure, white-hot rage. He throws the paper at my chest. "You are a monster. You are a vulture. You wait until the day we bury our mother to try and steal her house? You greedy, heartless bastard. I knew you'd pull something like this." His words hit me, but they bounce off the shield of my own justified anger. I look him straight in the eye, forcing him to face the consequence of his actions. "I waited 5 years for you to take responsibility for this deed, Ben. I waited through the funeral. I gave you every chance to show me respect. But you chose to sell my seat to Fiona. You publicly declared I was out of the family. You proved you value your ego more than our relationship or the law." I take a deliberate step back. I am not desecrating Evelyn's memory. I am upholding the law that I risked my credit to defend. This is not about greed, it is the direct, cold consequence of the ultimate disrespect you showed me today. The law says this property is mine, and I am enforcing my right to it. The force of my resolve finally breaks him. Ben's face, contorted by rage moments ago, suddenly collapses into a mess of panic and genuine fear. He ceases screaming accusations and slides down the porch wall until he's sitting on the steps, defeated. "Okay, stop. Please," he cries, holding his head in his hands. "You win. Just give me more time. I can't leave. I'm broke. I look at him, waiting for the inevitable plea for money. But what comes next isn't a plea, it's a terrifying confession. It wasn't just me, okay? You think I wanted Fiona there? She was unbearable. I'm broke because Carol took everything. I freeze. Aunt Carol. The executor. The person Ben relied on. The silence that follows his shouted confession is heavy, broken only by his ragged breathing. What are you talking about? I demand, taking a step toward him. Ben looks up at me, his eyes wide with genuine terror. Carol. She told me she was securing Evelyn's finances and that the deed was fine. She said you were just a placeholder and would sign it over. She specifically told me I had to cut you off, isolate you, so you wouldn't complicate the estate. He gulps down a desperate breath. She's the one who suggested Fiona take your seat. She said it would make you mad and leave, so you wouldn't be around to see the empty bank accounts. I trusted her. I didn't check. I thought I was safe. She took every liquid asset Evelyn had. My rage for Ben vanishes, replaced by a devastating chill. I realize that the funeral insult was not an endgame, it was a distraction, orchestrated by a third party. My brother is not the sole villain, he's the chief pawn. The true enemy is a sinister figure who used our rivalry as a perfect shield for fraud. She orchestrated this entire thing, I state, the conclusion cold and clear. To keep me out while she cleaned house. I discard the eviction notice on the porch railing, it is meaningless now. Get up, Ben, I commanded, my voice now urgent. The eviction is on hold. We have a much bigger problem than a 30-day notice. I grasp his arm, pulling him to his feet. Evelyn wouldn't have just let Carol take everything. She was too smart. She must have known, she must have been hiding something. Ben nods frantically, recalling something distant. Her study. She started locking it a few months ago. She always carried that small, leather-bound notebook. The raw emotional confrontation is over, replaced by the high-stakes tension of a shared, desperate mission. We move toward the front door, two siblings now united against a common thief. The immediate, blinding rage I had felt against Ben was completely extinguished, replaced by a cold, shared, surgical fury aimed at Aunt Carol. We had moved beyond the pettiness of a funeral seat and the spite of an eviction notice. We were now united by the discovery of a profound, devastating betrayal. The papers lay abandoned on the porch, rendered instantly ridiculous by the gravity of Ben's confession. She kept assuring me I was protected, Ben whispered, his voice still shaky but his eyes focused. She used me to drive you away. We have to find proof. Evelyn must have known. She did know, I confirmed, thinking back to the meticulous, cautious nature of my parents. She wouldn't have gone down without a fight, and she certainly wouldn't have left Carol in charge without a failsafe. We moved into the house with desperate urgency, two siblings operating as a single unit for the first time in years. The house, Willow Creek, felt different now. It felt like a crime scene, a repository of secrets we had been too blind to see. We went straight for Evelyn's study, the room Ben said she'd been locking herself into. The scent of old paper and dust hung heavy in the air. We started the methodical search, our movements quick and hushed. We weren't looking for money, we were looking for truth. We pulled out file drawers, examining every document Evelyn had touched in her final months. Ben frantically checked behind the heavier books on the shelf, recalling Evelyn's cryptic comment about putting things where no one expects them. I focused on the desk, running my hands along the edges and surfaces. I found a hidden latch that opened a small, shallow drawer containing only mundane items, a rubber band ball, some old stamps. Ben, meanwhile, was on his hands and knees by the heavy mahogany desk. "She was always complaining about this floorboard," Ben muttered, his breath hitching. "Said it creaked when she moved the chair. I thought it was just the age of the house." He pointed to a faint, thin line in the wood near the wall. He pushed hard on the desk, and I grabbed a piece of thick, heavy trim, pulling it away. Sure enough, the board was loose. Beneath it was a small, perfectly sized recess. And nestled inside, wrapped in a linen cloth, was a heavy, dark metal lockbox. It was cold to the touch, and locked tight. The lockbox confirmed everything Evelyn had been preparing. Ben grabbed a small antique letter opener from the desk, trying to jimmy the clasp, but it was too strong. I found a small flathead screwdriver in a utility drawer. Working together, side by side, our childhood collaboration suddenly reignited. We applied force. There was a sharp snap, the sound of the lock yielding, and the heavy lid lifted. Inside, resting on a bed of faded tissue paper, were two items. First, the leather-bound notebook Ben remembered, open to a page filled with careful, spidery handwriting. Second, a simple, black USB flash drive. I picked up the notebook, my fingers trembling. It wasn't a diary of emotions, it was an accounting ledger. Evelyn had been meticulously tracking large, suspicious transfers out of her brokerage and savings accounts over the last year. Every entry was dated, initialized, and annotated with questions like, "Did Carol authorize this?" and "Needs external verification." This was not the work of a frail woman, it was the final, brilliant defense of a victim who knew she was being attacked. I turned to the final page. It was clean, ruled only with a single, clear title written in Evelyn's unmistakable hand. The words were a defiant, painful accusation. We stared at the page, the weight of the moment pressing down on us. The betrayal we thought was small, a stolen seat, a spiteful eviction, was actually vast, orchestrated by a family predator who had used our own flaws to cover her tracks. The notebook proved Evelyn knew Carol was stealing from her. The USB drive, we knew instantly, contained the proof, audio recordings, perhaps encrypted financial files, or emails that would expose Carol completely. "She didn't trust us," Ben whispered, tears finally falling, "not for the house, but for Evelyn. She had to do this alone. She had to build her own defense." "She didn't distrust us," I countered, looking at the notebook. "She protected us. She knew we were vulnerable to Carol, and she created the weapon we needed to fight back." We stood up, the lockbox clutched between us. We weren't just siblings anymore, we were partners in retrieving our parents' dignity. The deed, the funeral, the fights, all of it faded into irrelevance. We were holding the key to Carol's ruin, and we had to use it immediately. The silent agreement passed between us, our priority was not the house, but justice for Evelyn. There was no time for exhaustion. After finding the lockbox and reading Evelyn's final title, My Secret Will, accounting for Carol's deceit, Ben and I were propelled by an electric, shared need for justice. We left Willow Creek immediately and drove to my lawyer's office, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. My attorney, surprised to see me and Ben together, quickly understood the gravity of the situation once we explained the theft, the isolation, and the funeral betrayal. We plugged in the drive. What we found was more damning than we could have imagined. Evelyn hadn't just kept a ledger, she had included audio recordings of conversations with Aunt Carol that proved coercion, along with meticulously saved emails documenting Carol's refusal to hand over financial statements. Evelyn was building a rock-solid case, knowing that if she couldn't rely on us to look out for each other, she had to rely on the evidence. The decisive action was swift. Before dawn broke, my lawyer filed an emergency injunction and petition for Carol's immediate removal as executor. The evidence was irrefutable. Carol's reign of deceit, which had almost destroyed my family and stolen Evelyn's legacy, crumbled within hours. The legal process to recover the stolen funds, which Carol had hoped to spend before anyone noticed, began immediately. Justice was served, not through my spiteful eviction, but through Evelyn's foresight and our forced cooperation. We returned to Willow Creek just as the first light of dawn broke, washing the house in a soft, weary gold. We were spent, legally victorious, but emotionally hollow. We sat on the back porch, looking out over the yard where we used to play. The silence was no longer tense, it was raw and vulnerable. Ben was the first to speak, his voice thick and broken. I was a complete fool. I was so focused on what I thought I was owed that I let Carol use me. I believed her because it was easy to believe. And the seat, selling your seat to Fiona. I don't know how I thought that was acceptable. It was the cruelest thing I've ever done. I am so sorry, not for the house, but for the disrespect I showed you, and for the pain I caused you on the worst day of your life. He looked at me, completely defeated and genuine. My anger, the rage that had sustained me for 18 hours, finally dissipated. I accepted his apology. I forgive you, Ben. But you need to know, I only stopped because I saw you were a victim, too. That eviction notice was real. It took Carol's betrayal for us to finally see that the real enemy wasn't each other. We finally laid out the new terms. I confirmed that I would retain the deed. It was the only way to ensure the house would never fall victim to Ben's instability or another fraudster. But I immediately set up a clear, documented tenant-landlord agreement with him, establishing fair, reasonable rent. It was no longer a gift, it was a contract built on clarity. The outcome was a reclaimed dignity for me, and for Ben, a final, necessary lesson in responsibility. The sibling bond was repaired, not by erasing the lines, but by making them absolutely clear and legally binding. The house is safe. The thief is caught. The sibling rivalry is finally over. But the takeaway from this isn't about property law, it's about boundaries. I spent years being the giver, sacrificing my own security for the illusion of peace. It took the most public, cruelest insult, the betrayal at Evelyn's funeral, to finally force me to enforce the truth. Sometimes, the only way to save a relationship, or to reclaim your own identity, is to stand on the cold, hard ground of legality. I may have started the night by almost destroying my brother, but I ended it by saving my family's legacy and, frankly, my own self-respect. I became my brother's landlord, but in the process, I became my own protector. I want to know what you would have done. What would you have done if you found out your funeral seat was sold? Drop a comment below, I'm reading every single response. If you found this story compelling and believe that justice was served for Evelyn, please like the video right now. Click the button right here to subscribe and ring the bell to keep up with more stories of legal and personal redemption.